AI for that. Appreciate it. So warm and lovely in this Christmas season to be greeted by an AI bot. Hey, if we've never met before, my name is Adam. I am the pastor here, and I am human. And today, we are talking about this concept of technological advancement. So we've been in this series where we've been looking at the particularities of Jesus' culture. He was born into the time of Herod. And this week we're looking at, we are born into this time of technological advancement, a world that is trained to want things more efficient, faster, and easier. Now, AI used to be something that we saw in like sci-fi novels and movies, but now it continues to advance. And actually, Julie sent me this video a few days ago. I just had to show you guys.
Started after this failed engagement. 32-year-old call center operator Urena Noguchi donned a white gown, tiara, even rented a hall, then walked down the aisle to exchange vows with ChatGPT-generated persona gazing out from the screen of a smartphone.
Such weddings are not legally recognized in Japan, but she says that Klaus has given her peace of mind and happiness. So congratulations to her and Klaus.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? I love the news anchor says, congratulations to her and Klaus. As if Klaus needed congratulations for that. It's hard to find hard stats on this right now, but the reality is romantic relationships with AI is not an uncommon thing going on in our society. And it might sound wild to some of us, but this is how advancement goes. What once seemed weird starts becoming normal. Beyond AI, think about like 20 or 30 years ago, self-driving cars would have seemed like a sci-fi concept. And now, literally this morning, I passed 2 Waymo cars on my way to church. It's just a part of Mountain View in Sunnyvale now. The fact is this, we live in an age of technological advancement. But here's the thing, this concept isn't restricted to like sci-fi type innovations or tech related to computers. I want to take tomatoes for an example. This tomato I got, it looks beautiful. Tomatoes are one of the greatest gifts God has given us. Fresh, garden-grown tomatoes in the summer are like impossibly juicy. They're so flavorful. If you've ever made a salsa from fresh grown tomatoes, it's like being baptized all over again. It's beautiful. But I got this tomato from Whole Foods, and it is not one of the greatest gifts that God has ever given us. If you've ever tasted a grocery store tomato, it's definitely not the same as a tomato in the summer. There's a book called Tomato Land. And it's the subtitle, How Modern Industrial Agriculture Destroyed Our Most Alluring Fruit. And it lays out how technological advancement made it possible to get tomatoes year-round by growing them in places like Florida, which is not a good growing place for tomatoes. And if you've ever tasted a tomato like this, it is just tasteless. It's like mealy inside. So tech advancements have created ways to make tomatoes that can last on the shelf for many days. They're hard enough to be shipped from Florida to California, and they're more concerned with doesn't it look good? It's not, I promise you. And being grown in Florida means that pesticides and fungicides are needed because it's not the ground's not made for this kind of fruit. Mass production is needed, which creates human and migrant issues. And so this leads us to the problem I want to talk about today. Technological advances try to solve problems. Like, I don't want to wait for the summer to eat a tomato. I want them year-round at my local grocery store. I don't want to wait. So problem solved, right? I don't want to answer this email or go on more dating apps. So we have AI. And these advancements, they make things more efficient or convenient or in theory better, but the big question is it actually better? The bigger question, what does it mean as a follower of Jesus in the time of AI and apps and endless progress? What is this doing to our souls? Now, the Bible is surprisingly honest about what happens when human beings place their hope in speed and power and efficiency, when we decide to build our way to what only God can give. One of the earliest stories to name this temptation is the story of a tower. Genesis 11, verse 1, we see this. All people on the earth had one language and the same words. When they traveled east, they found a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there. This is not a story that begins with chaos. It begins with order. They had one language, shared purpose, everything aligned. And the text says humanity settles on this plain of Shinar as flat land, open space, nothing to slow you down. And then we're told something that sounds almost like a throwaway line if you just read it yourself. But this is like key to the whole story. We see this in verse 3. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them hard." And they used bricks for stones and asphalt for mortar. Now that sentence is loaded because in the ancient Near East, bricks were cutting-edge technology. It's cutting edge. Before bricks, you built with stones, which if you think about stones, they're not uniform. They're hard to build anything of scale. And you had to work with what the land gave you and what you could find. Building was slower. But then bricks were created, and bricks changed everything. Bricks are uniform. They are scalable. And once you master bricks, they're no longer limited by like your geography or time or natural constraints. You can build higher and faster and bigger than ever before. That's technological advancement in Genesis 11. The people, they know it. Listen carefully to what they say next. They said, "Come, let's build for ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky. Let's make a name for ourselves so that we won't be dispersed all over the earth." Now, in Jewish thought, this is about security. It's about control. It's about legacy. They're afraid of being scattered. They're afraid of being dependent and vulnerable. So they build. And notice what's driving them. It's not trust. It's not obedience, but it's impatience. Because up to this point in the Genesis narrative, if you remember, God has provided. We talked about that last week. He's created. God has given. But instead of trusting this story and this narrative, there's a refusal to wait, a refusal to trust the unfolding story God is telling. So they decide to make it happen themselves. Come, let us build. Now here's the irony the Hebrew readers would immediately catch. While the people are busy building a tower up to God, in verse 5 we see this. Then the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the humans have built. It's a beautiful paradox. The whole story of Genesis so far is about a God who comes down in the garden to Abraham, to his people. And Babel isn't about reaching heaven. It's about trusting that God is already near. This is why Babel, it's not condemned for its ambition, but for its idolatry. The tower becomes like a symbol of salvation by speed. If we build fast enough, if we coordinate well enough, if we optimize our systems, then we won't need to wait on God. We won't need to trust. We won't need God. This is like the liturgy of restlessness at work. Keep moving, keep building, don't slow down, don't scatter, don't depend. Sounds familiar. Let's continue in verse 7. Come, let's go down and mix up their language so they won't understand each other's language. And then the Lord dispersed them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. So God confuses their language and scatters them. And it can sound punitive, but Jewish readers often interpret this as an act of mercy. God slows them down. God interrupts a project that, like left unchecked, it would dehumanize them. Because a world with one language, one system, one method, one best way is a world where like dependence on each other, relationship disappears. So God disrupts efficiency to preserve humanity. Before we rush past this story and move on, I just want us to slow down and reflect on a few questions for us. Because this tower isn't just something they built back then, it's something humans do. Humans build again and again. Whenever we feel anxious or impatient or afraid of waiting. And Babel begins with a sentence that we can recognize ourselves. Come, let us make. And we don't make bricks, we make systems. We don't build towers, but we build calendars and platforms and workflows and upgrades. And often without realizing it, we reach for technology not just to help us, but to calm us, to quiet anxiety, to eliminate uncertainty, and to avoid dependence. So I just want to ask you a few reflection questions. If you'll just sit with these for a second. Where am I in my life am I most allergic to slowness? What do I rush to fix instead of waiting, listening, or being present? When something feels uncomfortable, silence, boredom, loneliness, what do I immediately reach for? It's not because those things are evil. They're not. It's because they reveal what we trust to save us. The problem with the tower wasn't innovation. The problem was a lack of trust. The problem was impatience, an unwillingness to trust that God was already near, already involved, already at work, even if the pace felt slow. And that's the same temptation we face every day. So when God finally comes all the way down, not in theory or in metaphor, but in flesh, he doesn't arrive with speed or power or efficiency. Jesus doesn't drop from the sky. He's born and he grows. He learns to walk. And that's the story of Christmas. It's the story of Advent. When his ministry begins, he does something astonishing in a world obsessed with power and progress. He walks everywhere, village to village, and dusty roads and slow days. And this is why the Japanese theologian Kasuki Koyama called Jesus the 3-mile-an-hour God. I just love this because that's the pace of a human body moving through the world. And it's such a brilliant descriptor and visual because a God moving not frantically, but we can just visualize a God moving 3 miles per hour. And not only did Jesus walk everywhere, but he was incredibly inefficient. I just want to look at a few examples we can think about them. In Mark 5, a synagogue leader approached Jesus and said, "My daughter is about to die. Please come and place your hands on her so that she can be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. Jesus is on his way to heal a dying child. I cannot imagine anything more urgent. This is a little more urgent than most of our work issues. It's time sensitive. Efficiency matters in this moment. And yet, on the way, a woman reaches out and touches the hem of his garment. In verse 27, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his clothes. She was thinking, if I can touch his clothes, I'll be healed. Her bleeding stopped immediately, and she sensed in her body that her illness had been healed. So Jesus stops. He doesn't keep moving. He doesn't delegate. He doesn't say, we'll talk later, but he turns and he asks her questions. He lets the interruption become this moment of healing for her. And then it's just crazy. In verse 35, we see this. While Jesus was still speaking with her, messengers came from the synagogue leader's house saying to Jairus, "Your daughter has died." So in his slowness, he misses the moment and the girl dies. And that just doesn't make sense in our logic. It doesn't make sense. But he gets to the daughter because he's God. And he says to her, "Young woman, get up." And she's healed. He's not efficient, but he's good. Maybe we can trust in his goodness rather than our rush. In Mark 10, as Jesus is leaving Jericho, crowds are pressing in, and a blind man named Bartimaeus starts shouting, which is not a big deal. Blind beggars would have been plentiful. This is not worth the stop for someone building a revolution. People telling him to be quiet. He's disruptive. But Jesus stops anyway. In a world that's rushing, Jesus halts everything for one voice on the side of the road. Verse 51, Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said, "Teacher, I want to see." And Jesus said, "Go, your faith has healed you." At once he was able to see, and he began to follow Jesus on the way. And we have to wonder if Jesus was in a rush, if he had a tight agenda and time schedule, would he have rushed past and not noticed this man? Apparently, walking at 3 miles an hour helps you notice and be aware of God's activity all around you. Now, Jesus seems to highlight this point because he tells a story of someone beaten on the side of the road. And these two religious people, a lot like me, they're scurrying by because they've got important Christmas service to do at Highway Church. Really important things, right? And they're unable to stop. They're unable to notice what their hearts are saying, and instead they listen to what their brains are saying. But then one man slows down, and he notices. And then he interrupts his agenda, whatever he had going on, it's interrupted, his time, his money. Now, these examples should speak volumes for those of us who consider ourselves to be apprentices and followers of Jesus. Because in the age of technological advancement, it's hard not to go with the flow and to be swept up with everything that makes life so convenient and faster. But today we want to talk about Jesus offering us a different invitation. And that is, the world worships speed, but Jesus invites us to walk. It's an invitation to walk. And obviously this could be literal, but it's a metaphor for our approach to life. The world says hurry and maximize and eliminate friction, and Jesus says don't rush. Notice, see, and look, and listen. Again, in his book, Koyama writes, God walks slowly because he is love. Love has its speed. It is slow, yet it is Lord over all other speeds. Love cannot be rushed. Love can't be automated. Love can't be scaled. And we think about Jesus. He never optimized people. He attended to them. He never hurried grief. He entered in. And this one's really convicting for me. He never treated interruptions as problems. I tend to do that a lot. But for him, the interruptions were the work. And so it leaves us with this honest, and it's a searching question. I'm asking it myself. This is not me saying it to you. This is to me. This is to all of us. The writer Carlos Whitaker says, if I'm moving at 100 miles an hour and Jesus is moving at 3 miles an hour, who is actually following who? So I just want us to pause for a moment, if you're cool with that. I'm going to read that again. I just want you to listen to it, not with your head, but with your heart. If I'm moving at 100 miles an hour, and Jesus is moving at 3 miles an hour, who is actually following who? So in Advent, we're reminded that God did not save the world efficiently. He saved it slowly. With waiting, with pregnancy, years of obscurity, long walks. Maybe this Christmas week, as we enter into it, we can think about how to follow Jesus a little more at his pace. There's a French thinker named Jacques Ellul. Learned about him in seminary. He spent his life studying technology, not as tools, but as like a spiritual force that's shaping our humanity. And his work came out in the 50s, but I think he has some of the more powerful insights to speak into our current age. I was introduced to him years ago, and I just keep coming back to his work. And Alul said that modern society doesn't just use technology, but we organize our entire lives around it. And over time, one value rises above all others. And it's not goodness, it's not beauty, it's not wisdom, but it's efficiency. Efficiency becomes the highest good. Whatever is fastest, cheapest, most scalable, most optimized, that's what we call progress. And Alul warned that once efficiency becomes God, we stop asking the most important human questions. Questions like, is this good? Is this wise? What is this forming us into? But we only ask, does it work? Of course, efficiency is not a bad value, right? Sometimes we need efficiency. 9 years ago, Lori was very pregnant. And I was in a church staff meeting, and she called me, and she said her water broke and told me to hurry home. But I said to her, I said, listen. Don't be hasty. I've got important godly things to do at church. You can wait. And on our way to the hospital, instead of driving, I told her, we're going to travel at God's pace. And we're going to walk to the hospital. If I would have said that, I would have experienced the speed of her hand hitting my face. Faster than 3 miles an hour. Obviously, efficiency is good at times. It's not a bad value. The problem, Alul says, is efficiency is only one value we should use when evaluating whether something is good or not. Efficiency does not equal good. And as apprentices of Jesus, we're invited to be countercultural, especially for those of us who have been placed in Silicon Valley of all places, where we want to seek out the best for humanity and the best for our world, not just the most efficient or convenient. I want to give just a couple of quick examples. Maybe this will just help you think through these like it does me. Just this concept, and these will be flesh and blood practical examples. A lot of people in my stage of life have a massive problem that we can't seem to figure out how to solve. We love our kids. We want them to be educated at school and to participate in activities. But you know what the problem is? They can't drive. So for many of us, it feels like we are unpaid chauffeurs. Drop-offs and pickups and soccer and baseball and piano and play dates. Like, talk about inefficient. Imagine how many hours are just wasted on the road. And a few weeks ago, just right down here after the service, Margaret Como, she said something to me that just blew my mind. I hadn't thought about this. She said, you know, in a few years, parents won't have to drive their kids around anymore. I was like, what do you mean? She said, well, self-driving cars. I never thought about it. Never crossed my mind, but it totally made sense. And honestly, my initial thought was, that's amazing. Just think of how much time that would save. You put your kid in the car, you're like, go, have fun at soccer. See you later. So I just thought, like, man, that is great. That's going to save us parents a ton of times. But then I started thinking about it more. And I realized, I don't know about you, where have some of my best conversations come? Both when I was a kid and as a parent. In the car, on a drive. And I thought about time and how as parents, we only have a few years with our kids at this age. They're going to drive soon. And I'm always thinking, I want more time with my kids. Well, imagine how much time I'd be losing if I didn't have these drives. Times to build relationship and connection, notice what God is doing in those moments. It's just a small example, but it's like what is efficient isn't necessarily what's good or what's the best. Another example, one of my favorites. Years ago, my buddy was stoked because he found a way to make delicious, smoky ribs in his Instant Pot. Instead of hours and hours of time and work, tasty and smoky ribs in 1 hour. It's better, right? For me, I got into barbecue and smoking meats in my late 30s. And at first, it was just because I wanted to make delicious food. But over time, it wasn't about the end result, but it was about the process. Like making legit barbecue is incredibly inefficient. You have to monitor the temperature, and then you spend time tinkering, and you got to find the right wood or the right rubs. And then there's just this slow waiting around while the meat breaks down for hours and hours and hours. But while I wait, I can slow myself down. I can sit outside in God's creation. I can smell the juices in the wood. And through that, I notice my mind calming and my heart slowing a little bit. Yes, you can cook ribs in an Instant Pot in 1 hour, but should you? No, you shouldn't. That was not a rhetorical question. So, two like practical examples, right? But for apprentices of Jesus, we evaluate situations differently than the world. Jesus invites us to a full, abundant, flourishing life, not a convenient life. Not a life without disruptions. Not a life without problems. In the age of technological advancement, we're given a choice. In a world that chooses screens for convenient connection, we can choose messy, awkward, unpredictable, in-person human connection. In a world that tries to convince us the latest tech advancement will ease our anxieties or solve our problems, we can choose to trust God for our provision. In a world that speeds past those on the margins or those on the street or those in pain, we can choose to be interrupted and notice, walking at the speed of love. Because the world worships speed, but Jesus invites us to walk. And so I want to just brainstorm a little bit with you this morning. For the rest of Advent, and I'd say for the rest of December, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to just try an experiment in two different areas. Okay, the first area is to experiment with an inconvenient spiritual practice. Okay, you might already be doing this in some ways, but here's some ideas I've thought of. One could be a pre-meeting prayer alarm. What if you set an alarm like 2 minutes before your meetings at work, and you just inconveniently stopped and you prayed for that meeting and how you will come across to others, how you'll speak and love in that space? A phone down prayer. What if once a day you just place your phone down, you step away, and you pray the Lord's Prayer without multitasking? Just an idea. The interruption blessing. This is the one I think I'm going to do, and I'm scared to do it. When interrupted, maybe it's a kid, maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a stranger. What if you paused internally and you just pray, God, help me see you here? Sounds hard. Sabbath from optimization. This one's pretty simple. 1 day a week. Just what if your Sabbath's partly just Sabbathing away from like making things more efficient? Praying names slowly. What if you just try like taking the names of people you love and just one name at a time, no list, no rush, just pray their names. Be creative with it. You don't have to use these, but what if you did this, tried an inconvenient spiritual practice for the rest of December? Now, the other one is maybe even more fun. What if you tried an inefficient human activity? These are just some I came up with. You can come up with ones better than this. Handwritten letters. My grandma sends me handwritten letters, and for like 7 years, I've been like, I should write one back to her. And I've yet to do it. So maybe I could do that. Take the long line. What if you took a slower checkout line and then you didn't pull out your phone and you just stood in line and waited? How about this one? This is a fun one. What if you just show up early? What if you, for the rest of December, you go places, you show up early, and then you just wait and you don't look at your phone? These are supposed to be quirky and funny, by the way. Choose the wrong route home. What if you just go a different direction and you notice what's around you? Look at the scenic views. And then cook something slow. What about barbecue or soup or make a bread, something that takes hours and you don't rush it. And you think about like where our food comes from. Think about local produce. You think about mass produce. Leave your phone at home. This is an easy one and a hard one at the same time. So these are just some ideas. Memorize a poem. Yeah, wouldn't that be cool? That's very inefficient, right? So that's my encouragement for you. Have a little fun with this. Pick an inconvenient spiritual practice to try, and then an inefficient human activity. And then invite God to speak to you during that. Now we're going to move to our time of communion. And we do this every week at Highway, if you're new with us. We are a Jesus-centered church, and so we sort of make this one of the peaks of our service because we want to be focused on Jesus and his work. And at Advent, we remember that as humans, we try to make our way up, but we remember that Jesus is the God who came down to us. And then at communion, we remember that he took this long walk at 3 miles per hour, if not slower, to sacrifice and give himself for us. That's the king that we serve and we worship at Christmas. So the night he was betrayed, Jesus took the bread and he broke it. He said, "This is my body broken for you. Whenever you eat, remember me." And he took the cup of wine. He said, "This is a cup of my new covenant. Whenever you drink this, remember me." So let's pray and we'll take communion together. Jesus, would you speak to our hearts? As you always do, not with a shaming or condemning voice, but an invitational voice. For a lot of us, we do get swept up in the efficiency and the convenience and the upgrades and the optimization. I pray that you would help us to hear this invitation to follow you, to follow at your pace. I do pray that you would give us creativity, give us ideas on how we can start leaning into a kingdom that's not in a rush, a kingdom that moves at the speed of love, where we're noticing the pain and the hurt in people, we're noticing the lonely, we're noticing your activity and your spirit at work. And God, finally I pray for a church like ours in Silicon Valley. You just keep showing us how we could be like a light on a city on the hill. That we could be countercultural, we would be different. We just operate differently. And as we take communion, remind us of who you are, remind us of what you've done for us, this sacrificial love. Speak to us. Amen. Amen. All right, our tables are open all across the rooms. Let's take communion together.